No, you can't say mama now. I'm on live. I'm on live. I'm on live. Close the door. I'm serious. I was on live. You give them the pep talk. You let them know you're about to go on live. You take all of the precautionary measures, and then they just still, Mama, I'm on live. Greetings and welcome back. All right, greetings and welcome back once again. This is Umuna. I did not read Coming of Age in Mississippi yesterday, y'all. I don't even remember what happened yesterday. But nonetheless, I know I was in my thoughts, all of this up here. It was all up in the head wrap. That I actually wanted to, right, greetings and welcome for those who just joined us, speak about American blackface and controversy and Gucci and Prada and all of that extra nice stuff. And it's in the news once again, and it's being mentioned, and people are being triggered. And I came across a video that showed from last year, a school play. And I actually wanted to read this poem the other day, and all that never happened. So let me pull it up. A school play that had little children, I believe they were in the second grade, reciting the mask. And it was a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. And then all of them had these little handmade, you could tell it was made by the students on this blackface mask. And so then you have the Gucci, and you're like, oh, it's Black History Month, and why are they doing this, and everything of all things, right? So I'm just gonna put all of that, I'm ball it all up and put it into this discussion. I believe I named this The American Blackface Controversy, Gucci, Prada, Megyn Kelly, Trevor Noah, who I just watched, and he said, have the conversation. Been saying have the conversation. So we're going to have the conversation, but in a little bit of a different way. But before I do, actually, when I looked up a little bit about who Paul Laurence Dunbar was, that was on Saturday night. And then I found out that he passed. That would have been the anniversary. I believe it's the 123rd anniversary of his passing. So I'm going to read the poem, and then I'm going to read a little bit about him. And then we're going to jump off into this blackface controversy in a little bit of a different way, a little Solonomics way. So here is the poem. And I'll put the links, I guess, at the end. Because I'm kind of, again, preforming. Sometimes I come with all the research already done, and I kind of want to share a little bit about the process of research, like actually how I come to certain conclusions and what I'm looking for, essentially, when I'm going into research mode, essentially. I love research. Some people may not. I do. And so I find it a pleasure to be able to uncover certain things and unearth things that maybe we have forgotten about, or maybe we never knew. So We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with wide myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but our great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. And so, people would have to do this if it was in a poetry cipher. And essentially what I received, because a lot of times there's where something is written, the time and place and things that inform is kind of just like music today, that's informing it. And some 120 plus years later, one could only assume, based on your knowledge of history, if you're going to do actual analysis of it, or we can bring it into our day and age and try to identify with it there. But if we want to identify with where the young man was, because he died at a very young age, at 33, from tuberculosis. So if we want to kind of identify where he was, this would have been, had to have been in the early 1900s, okay? Wearing a mask that grins and lies. It's pretty self-explanatory. The face that you have to put on, I believe it was another, I believe it was the W.E.B. Du Bois, if I'm not mistaken, who spoke about these two personalities, that this split that was forced, that you had to take on to be able to live in the hostile environment in which you lived, because your very survival is what depended on it. And so because, and even during the time of slavery, the melancholy face was not accepted. You had to do your task with a smile, or else you were going to be deemed an ingrate, you were going to be deemed ungrateful, you were going to be deemed all manner of things. So again, back to the domestic violence institution that I assert, that if we look at through that lens, we would really understand the slavery and the effects thereof. This mask after slavery, Jim Crow era, post Jim Crow, this is what one would have to, when you see them, you have to do the yes massa. This is, funnily enough, because I'm wondering what does this have to do with blackface? Funnily enough, that mentality of step and fetching was something that was, what's the word I'm looking for here? It was created out of the need to survive, and then ultimately it became what these blackface characters were perpetuating. So somebody forced you into a space, then you created this maladaptive behavior, and then they turn around and mocked you for this behavior, if you can understand what I'm saying. Okay, so we wear the mask of grins and lies. There's many people that's left on record that told you how they really feel. Like, it's like right now, even in today's day and time, you go out to the plantation, as many call it, and you put on your voice and your clothes, and you look as how the person who's in charge wants you to look, right? And the minute you come home, you become someone else. And it may be the case. This may be the case with This may be the case with many people. It may be a human thing that you on your P's and Q's when you're in public. But for the melanated people in the West, it's even more so. It's even more exasperated. It's even more pronounced, better yet. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile. So they say, how are they able to smile? You see, again, the blackface caricatures from that time period, that you're always smiling and you always get some ass and you're always dancing. This is something that you were forced to do. You couldn't, because guess what? In today's space and time, if you show up to this discussion, if you show up as yourself, you are threatening. So this is a conversation that not just one side can have. Effectively, we have to be honest that the environment, for instance, in today's day, space and time, I'm wondering, what are you talking about? I'm using this poem as a springboard to have this discussion about the American blackface controversy, okay? In today's space and time, I mean 2019, 2018, if you show up to work in dreadlocks, I just saw that the other day, on more than one occasion, the Supreme Court deemed it lawful for these mostly Afrocentric hairstyles to be deemed unprofessional. So once again, you're working into the plantation or an environment that is not ruled by you, and someone else is making the rules of what is professional, and everything that is you is not professional. So if you want to show up to work in your head wrap, you have to have religious exemption, or you have to justify showing up as yourself. If you show up with your afro, if you show up with your locks, you have to justify showing up as yourself. And we saw that in the case where it was in the Army, that the Army was trying to deem locks and braids, which is mostly worn by melanated people, to be professional. So when Paul Laurence Dunbar says in his poem, with torn hearts and with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, because you're tearing away from, this is why we have the re-emergence of natural and the embracing of natural. Who celebrates being themselves? A people who are oppressed, a people who were told over all this time, and it's not there. We can't keep saying it's happened then, because it's happening now. I can pull up a number of articles that speaks to this very issue today. I actually just saw a video that came on the news of a man who worked at for a month at a location at a job, and he was in orientation. And after that month, the person came and showed him some type of slip from the job that says, "Oh, officially now, you have to cut your hair, or you can't continue here, or you have to cut your beard, or you have to do whatever it is that we say so that we can feel comfortable." So if the man, especially the beards, if the melanated man shows up in beard and looking scary or looking menacing, right? One will say, "I don't like that face. I need you to make a face. I need you to make a face that's going to make me comfortable." So that smile on that enslaved individual or that impressed individual's face would make the oppressor feel more comfortable with what they were doing, because the root of this is, which we hopefully going to get to, the root of this controversy is in an offense, a grave offense. And because there's something called a guilty conscience, it's like a kidnapped victim or domestic abuse. Let's take domestic abuse. The man or the female is domestically abusive. They don't want to see you pouting. They don't want to see you upset. They want to see you smiling. They want to see you feeling as though you appreciate what little they've done for you. So maybe after they punch you, and this is some things that happen. Maybe after they've gaslighted you or manipulated you or gotten you into or whatever situation, after that, whatever little trinket they give you, you're supposed to be grateful for that. So if I give you a trinket because it's a holiday, or if I give you the day off, you're supposed to show that gratitude, even though you're being abused. So the poem says, "With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties." You know what I'm saying? You couldn't sound like you weren't appreciative, even though you were in an abusive relationship. Why should the world be overwise? Like, why should you know what's really going on with us? You know what I'm saying? This is how I'm interpreting it. Why should you know what's really going on with us and counting all of our tears and sighs? Because you really don't care. You see what I'm saying? You really don't care what's really going on with us. You see what I'm saying? And so why even pretend? And we see over 110 years later, 120, 130, 150, the fact that it's still coming up and people can say, "I didn't know," or "How is this offensive?" means you really didn't care to know. Right? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. Meaning, this is why I wrote Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. If you're not aware, the first version is on Amazon. I've talked about it. If you want to know what it's about, you don't want to go to Amazon, just search it with my name and it'll come up. Once you show you're upset, once you show any emotion outside of the prescribed emotions, you are wrong. So this is why I'm going to label you. I wondered, as I was early on in this research, how can an emotion be demonized? A human emotion. How can a human emotion be labeled on just one set of people? Like, that perplexed me. I was like, this is weird. But this emotion is something that if I put it on you, I'm going to make you feel so bad about you actually lashing out about the abuse that I'm doing to you, that you're just going to be quiet. It's my get out of jail free card. I can silence you by calling you angry, and you're going to be so upset about the fact that I called you angry, you won't even remember, or no one else will listen, as a matter of fact, to a fact about why you're angry. So oftentimes, even though it's difficult when someone is angry, I find myself trying to hear the source of their anger. Because if we only stop at the delivery, then we have not dealt with the source. And therefore, it's going to continue to manifest itself in society. And this is what we're experiencing. Okay. We smile, but he says, "Oh, gay Christ, I'll cry." So again, this speaks to the only place for many that was the church, that they were able to take the mask off to a certain degree, and they would have to put on another mask, but take that mask off. The Black church, which was like one of the longest running cohesive institutions in America, is this concept of the Black church, because this is a place where you could cry out. This is the place where you can stay. And we actually were just reading I gotta do the plug, Coming of Age in Mississippi, because again, this is cultural context to a lot of the things that we're hearing, where this was the place where you can release, kind of have that release and discharge that negative energy and project it onto a hope, right? That one day that you will no longer be oppressed, because the soul, when the soul is oppressed, the soul is going to have to find a way, a space to be able to express that oppression, or it's going to internalize it and you know, slowly poison itself. It says, to thee the tortured souls arise again, a space in which you can have hope. We sing, but oh, the day is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But he basically, to me, he's saying back to reality. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask, being that you can be deluded. You can continue to think, but they're okay. We gave them jobs in good cities. We let them come to our schools. Look at this. They were even president. Why are they upset? Because the wrong has never been righted. Those things are just very topical because the wrong, this is what Trevor Noah, I just saw an interview with him, and he was speaking about apartheid in South Africa and the need and what the country did to actually speak to the issue. America has, by large, skirted the issue. Skirted the issue. This is just, the blackface issue is a deeper issue. It's like the bump on the face. Close the door. It is like the he stole my Mayo, why did you do that? He threw me off, y'all. I'm like, it is like the it is like the he threw me all the way off. I'm like, what in the world? It is like the acne, okay, on the face. This blackface issue. It's not the core of the issue. It's a manifestation of the issue. So let's go back. So that was Paul Dunbar. Again, he passed February 9th. I meant to do this 2 days ago, but he passed February 9th, 1906. So we're in 2019. So he would have passed 100 and wait, was I wrong? 1906, 2006, 2016, like 123 years ago. That's correct. 123 years ago. He was from, just giving him a shout out. We just read his thing, his page. He was from Dayton, Ohio, and he married Alice Dunbar. He was 33 years old when he passed. It says here that he was born June 27th. He was an American poet, novelist, and playwright of the 19th century, born in Dayton, Ohio, to parents who had been enslaved in Kentucky before the Civil War. Dunbar began to write stories and verse while he was a child. He was the president of his high school's literacy society, and he published his first poems at the age of 16 in Dayton newspaper. And I'm reading from Wikipedia. Much of Dunbar's most popular work in his lifetime was written in the Negro dialect associated with antebellum South, though he also used Midwestern regional dialect of James Whitcomb Riley. And you can continue to read a little bit about him, but I wanted to just share that. Now, the deeper issue, if we say that blackface is the acne on the face of the issue, when the certain things trigger acne, right? If you eat too much sweets, next thing you know, you wake up the next morning, boom, you have acne. If you ate too much something oily, the next thing you woke up, boom, something triggered the acne. So something triggered this conversation around blackface. But blackface is connected to a deeper issue. So I like to do analogies. So if we're going to talk about acne, right? Acne, oftentimes, your skin is your longest organ. And the skin also is a space where if something is going on internally, it pushes out the toxins outside, and then the toxins begin to manifest on the skin. Okay, a lot of people don't realize that. So if you eat a lot of dairy, if you eat a lot of oily and fried foods, if you eat a lot of these things, what it does is it compromises your what? Your what? Everybody in the audience, tell me what that compromises. Mona, why are you talking about acne when you talk about American blackface? Good dude, it's face and blackface. But anyway, if you eat a lot of oily foods, fatty foods, if you eat a lot of cheese and milk and dairy and things of that nature, what's that going to compromise? It's going to compromise your liver, because it's your liver's job to begin to process those things. So this is how people can, and a lot of people in America have this fatty liver, okay? Because your liver doesn't know what to do with all of this stuff. So what it does, it dumps it back into the bloodstream, and the bloodstream begins to push it back out onto the skin in many situations. And so that is the biological things that happens with us when something is not addressed, because something has been ingested that kind of poisons the system to a certain degree. And so what is this thing that has poisoned the system that's allowing this blackface controversy, or this pimple to emerge on the face of American history? It's the great catastrophe. It's the historical trauma. So I'm going to write a little, read what I shared on Facebook this morning concerning peeling back the layers of historical trauma, fact finding. This is a little bit about how I found it beneficial to study, because if we don't kind of if we just hone in and don't back up and able to see the bigger picture, then we kind of come to wrong conclusions. Wow. Feel free to share. Astonished. Feel free to share. Historical trauma, okay? Fact finding. So this is a historical trauma. So everybody, I see a lot of news stations like, this is the history of blackface. This is the history of blackface. This is the history of blackface. Cool. We're going on a fact finding mission. So you do need to know the history of blackface. But we also need to know, again, like the acne, you're not going to just go and get acne steroid medicine to put on your face and still not be told that, hey, these are the things that you're eating that you need to take out of your diet, right? Eventually, you're going to need to clean your liver. Before you clean your liver, you're going to need to clean kidneys. Before you clean the kidneys, you're going to need to clean your colon. You know what I'm saying? And then you're going to need to stop ingesting the poison. And then after all of those things, you're going to need to clean your gallbladder and eventually your blood, right? If y'all can't tell, or let me say you can't tell, I'm going to, I've studied about cleansing because I know that that's connected also with healing. When I was gone, I saw somebody say, welcome back. I've been gone for a year. Not really gone. I've been working on a vegan restaurant that we have up and running here in Florida. And so all of these things for me are very real in the way in which I'm connecting them, but I'll continue. So the historical trauma, what happened? This is the it, okay? If you want to write it down, if you want to replay, whatever you want to do, this is just me sharing how I come to certain conclusions. The it. So right now, for most, American blackface is the it. So let's say, for instance, it's the it, okay? It's the it because we don't want to go too far and lose everybody. Fine. American blackface is the it, this blackface controversy. Who did it? So then we say, this is just like our book report in school. We'll say, who did it? Now, this morning, I found that, I found someone sharing that. What's his name again? Let me make sure I got his name correctly. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can be informed when we come to these discussions, right? Instead of just being emotional. Emotion has its place, but if it's ill-informed emotions, then we sometimes we don't get to the crux of the matter, right? So oh, okay, we're already at Wikipedia. So then we say blackface. Now Wikipedia, for me, I don't just use Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a mounting amount of sources, okay? Which usually the person who's editing the Wikipedia article is going to either put it in a way that it has a spin. So you see all these footnotes here. This is really the gold mine for me at Wikipedia. Because one thing about them, because it's an online thing, you see all of this? This right here is where you want to be. Because in these books, you're going to be able to do certain researches that maybe the person who was writing the article only wanted one line. And so when you have, and you desire a totality, a more holistic view of something, you will find the gold mine at the bottom of the Wikipedia article, like Blackface and Blackness, the minstrel show in American culture, right? I would go and look for this book. This is how I do research that I do. It's like a start, a launching pad where to begin, okay? Behind the burnt cork mask, early blackface mentioned the antebellum American culture. And I actually read this bit of it when I was looking for, so you click on the book when I was looking for information about the angry black woman syndrome. You click on the book, you see where the book is available. Sometimes you will have some intro to the book available on Google Books, boom, okay? And then for those who don't know or do research where you just do the articles are not going to tell you the fullness of what you need to know. So boom, in just 2 seconds, the real history of minstrelsy in this country, where it's to be honestly and comprehensively written and touch in on one way or another, every form of popular music we have on some part of our composed tradition. Right? This is the introduction of this book. Again, I found it in the link as you just saw. And then I'll read the first um, read the first paragraph just to give an insight, and then I'll go on to some other things. The history of blackface minstrelsy does not just, quote, touch, unquote, every form of popular music. It is linked to the very formation of antebellum popular culture. The powerful effect and market dominance of the minstrel show were based on a variety of entertainment blackface minstrelsy offered at a relatively low cost and resulted from the frequent content adjustments managers and performers made to meet the expectation of antebellum audiences. Minstrelsy was a commodity, a collection of loosely related genres addressed to the lowest common denominator audience, but not always the lowest class, for the express purpose of providing at least a modest living for performers who seldom cross over to other musical genres. So that first paragraph is loaded. Like I would stay all day in this first paragraph, but for the purpose of this conversation, I won't. But for instance, basically this is a culture that was evolving, meaning that the projections of the audience is what, if you did this show and the audience didn't laugh at a certain point, you would take it out. If you did this show and the audience laughed at a certain point, you would explore more of that. You would give them more of that punchline. And so we're looking at a culture that consisted of who was going to these shows, a society of people. Antebellum means before this slavery conversation ended, right? In the early 1830s, all right? All of this is in the first paragraph. And so we see that what was happening was a lot of the people, the South, was frustrated. We got to understand it's flipped now. The South was the one who had the money. The South was the one who was rich. The South was the one who was, places like South Carolina, places like Savannah, Georgia. These are the ports that benefited greatly from slavery. Okay, hold on a second. And so this indifference, this desire to maintain the institution, this desire to be convinced and to convince others that the slaves liked it. Because if you take away the slaves, the very basis of how we live in, then our entire structure is going to fall. Okay, so this was a bit of projection, all right, and deflection. There's all kind of psychological terms I could pull out, but this was the performers who were going around giving this entertainment an escape. Just like in today's day and time, entertainment is a large industry, mostly made up of people who want to provide an escape for other people. So you see what I'm saying? The people are feeding this narrative. That's just in the beginning of why this thing became popularized. And further, as they said, it became, in other spaces, authentically American. And this is what informed the music industry early on here in America, the recording music industry, the film industry. And who was in charge? The European. Okay? The European was in charge. This was the ruling class. So again, if I'm oppressing you and I want to show that you like it, then I'm going to create things in and around how I see you seeing me. I'll read another one. The primary convention that identified the minstrel show as entertainment was burnt cork makeup. The combination of burnt pulverized champagne cork and water, sometimes petroleum jelly or a similar substance, served as a racial marker, announced that a single actor or an ensemble offered what were selected aspects of arguably, quote, African American culture to audiences interested in how racial differences and enslavements reinforce distinctions between Black and white Americans. This is also important to keep in mind. During this time, the 1830s, we're talking about abolition. Hold on one second. I'm going to release my screen. Hold on. So again, that's one book. I clicked this book because I read some of this before when I was doing some research. But let me release my screen for a second. This is how I say that everything connects to something else, right? And so to pretend like one thing doesn't relate to the next, then that's not getting a holistic view of history. Now, in the 1830s, if you look up what was going on in the 1830s and why this pushback of this, because before this time, it was sufficient enough for a fiddler to go around on plantations and play the fiddle. It must also be said that one of the key factors of entertainment in the heat or the thick of slavery was the melanated body. The master would sit on his porch. He would be drinking mint julep. He would be drinking his whiskey, smoking his cigar or his tobacco, and he would watch the enslaved population entertain him. There's spaces in which they would give the men, the big, huge bucks, they would give them liquor, and they would put them in a ring to box. We saw this, some of this in the fact that, no, I won't even go there right now. So they would put them to box, or they would put them to headbutt. They would put them to entertain them. So let's just get this straight. The melanated body for many of those in this space were always used as a source of entertainment. As we see the whole notorious fiddler who was the old school DJ, he would be hired out and he would be paid a little something to go from plantation to plantation on special occasions to entertain the white folk. Okay. This is the white folk, as they would say. Okay, so boom, this is not new. So, and during this time, the European is looking at the jovialness, the spiritedness of the melanated body. And when they got into their own spaces, they would jeer, they would mock, they would mimic. Now, when in the 1830s and 1820s, there became a surgence in the North and abroad of anti-slavery rhetoric, meaning the abolitionist movement is picking up steam. Okay, again, this is all history that if we don't know this history, then we don't understand what introduced this. So the first thing that I put here, what happened, or the it, right? What happened? What is the it? So in order to do the it, we have to go a little bit before the it so that we can understand the it, okay? And so what was happening is that those in the South were like, yo, we have to let the Northerners, who are not really on board right now with all of this slavery, because a lot of people who were enslaved in the North were more in factories enslaved. There's a book called Henry Box Brown that speaks about that, or in homes, okay? It wasn't really plantation slavery to that degree. And so while the South was holding on strong, like, yo, we ain't letting this go, they pushed out this narrative that the Negroes like it. Will y'all mind your business? They like it. Why are you acting as though they don't like it? So like, Amuna, you bugging out. So if you look at 1830s, the Liberator, okay, this is why you see a lot of the laws that came up now that prohibited reading. It came to a head during these times of the 1800s because there were anti-slavery newspapers and abolitionist newspapers that were going out, and it was rousing the Negroes. The Liberator is one of them, by William Lloyd Garrison, okay? And William Lloyd Garrison is who Frederick Douglass linked up with when he started going on his tour for anti-slavery. So I say all that to say, this is the atmosphere. This is the overview of the atmosphere that's happening. So they're doing a propaganda campaign. This is what Blackface was to a certain degree. It took a thought process to say, you know what, we're going to push this narrative. And so they began to go into different places in the North, because the North wouldn't have seen Southern slavery, right? So they run ahead of the conversation so that they can show the North what Southern slavery looks like. We like it, the Negroes like it, y'all need to mind your business. This is kind of like what we're experiencing when somebody says they're in an abusive relationship. I'm gonna keep pushing this because I promise y'all, this is my thesis. When someone says they're in an abusive relationship, here's a prime example. I have to bring it up because I didn't finish that one either. But unraveling R. Kelly. When the people are saying that R. Kelly is abusing these women, what happens? People then say, oh, it was staged, it was on TMZ. The people who are involved in this situation that the outsider doesn't have a lot of information about, they decide to come out to the public. So they see him walking in the mall, or they see her rubbing his head. And then the people are like, see, she likes it. There's no, what's your problem? We're fine. Why are y'all in our business? So this Blackface conversation, to what I have studied thus far, was the answer to mind your business. Okay. And so it was just like these things that we see gets millions of views because people want to see whether or not the abuse is true or not. This gets great. Like they said, all different classifications of people were coming out, European people, to these box offices, to these stage houses, to these plays, to see their first taste of what Southern slavery was like. And so who's at the helm? Who's holding this conversation hostage? Who's misinforming the people? The very same people group who are the oppressor. So they get to shape this narrative. Okay? Hopefully y'all you're hearing me thus far. So let's go back. This is what's shaping the narrative of Blackface. So you had certain people who, or characters that were not just the Jim Crow, which was, what's his name now? Now, let me give another name. What's his name? I believe I just, they said that, let me go back. So Blackface, oh, let me go forward. So I showed you that in the comment section, not the comment section, in the resource section about this culture. Let me go back up. And then you have somebody who begins to start pushing it into these different playhouses. And again, many people start picking it up. It's like, you know, oh, wow, this is what's up. We can really make this happen. So let me read a little bit more Wikipedia here. This is the what are we talking about? I might have to come back and speak more because I have like nine points, but I guess we're at who did it, right? We already talked about what is it, and then we're going to talk about who did it. Again, these are these racial stereotypes. You have the stereotypes such as the angry Black woman. Believe it or not, that Sapphire character was in Blackface. Jim Crow was in Blackface. What do they call him? Not the city slickster. They would call him the it's going to come back to me. The one who tries to imitate the European, but doesn't do it to the satisfaction. So they act like they're smart, but they're really not. There's a word, but the word escapes me right now. So I'm going to read a little bit of history, but this is just the on the surface history. Blackface was a performance tradition in the American theater for roughly 100 years. That's a very long time, right? Beginning around 1830. And they said it's not over. It's not over because just as they said they got eventually Black people to put on blackface, this is what we're seeing mostly in the box offices. This is why you won't see certain actors get certain awards unless they fit the classic stereotype of either the thug, the villain, the whore, the mammy. You're not going to get any high levels of awards unless you fit these stereotypes. So when they say roughly 100 years, it's longer than that because it's still here. It quickly became so popular elsewhere, particularly in Britain, where the tradition lasted longer than in the US, occurring on primetime TV, most famously in the Black and White Minstrel Show ending in 1978. And Are You Being Served, a Christmas special in 1976, and finally in 1981. In both the United States and Britain, blackface was most commonly used in the minstrel performance tradition, with which it both predated and outlasted. Let me jump down here, because they just they ain't getting to the meat and potatoes here. But again, if you want the overview, this is what you're going to see. But I wanted to see who, something Rice. Rice is his last name. Let me see if I find him right here. Hold on. Thomas D. Rice. That's his name. That's his name. Thomas D. Rice. He popularized blackface. You have Edwin Forrest. So we're talking about the who. You have George Washington Dixon, right? So these are the people who are building this thought process, who were not necessarily the plantation owners, but who would have witnessed, who would have been around, who had a vested interest to say, I'm going to mock and I'm going to chide and I'm going to make this a stage show, right? And from there, because of the outpouring of the audiences, it became acceptable, and eventually melanated bodies joined in when it was no longer acceptable for the Europeans to do it. Melanated bodies came in and they began to perpetuate this stereotype. And like I said, still up until this day. So who did it? We have a bit of that. We can definitely, go in and comb out all of that information. Who was affected by it? So I would say one person would say, well, off the bat, you know what I'm saying? Thank you so much, One Tough Guy. We got to deal with the issues. We really have to deal with the issues, and we have to deactivate the trigger. I'm big on talking about deactivating the trigger. We are triggered right now. The moment it comes up, we're triggered. If you deal with the information, then you won't be triggered because you will be in control of the narrative. You will be in control of the way in which you respond because you're informed. If we're looking at it as you still have the power to make me feel a kind of way, then yes, we're going to run around, boycott this and boycott that, right? But if we deal with the honesty of what's happening, look at it for what it is, and deactivate the trigger, then we no longer give others the power over us, okay? So who was affected? I would say initially, the European mind was affected because their mind is affected. Number one, if we look at the initial trauma and the guilt that's surrounding this trauma, then we can understand that the person is in guilt. They call it white fragility. There's a lot of information on this conversation of white fragility, but that's what we're looking at when we're having this conversation. A guilt complex, a savior complex, a resentment, and downright fear is at the base of this. Because if you're looking at 1830, if I don't want to give you the wrong date, if you're looking at 1830, then we're talking about Nat Turner. Nat Turner Rebellion, if I'm not mistaken, it's in 1831. I wasn't wrong. 1831, Nat Turner Rebellion. Remember what's happening in the 1830s? Blackface. Who's afraid in the 1830s? A lot of people. They're afraid of that. Nat Turner's Rebellion is 1831. Okay, Nat Turner's Rebellion kicked off a whole lot of stuff. We have to understand the sequence of events. So in 1831, we have Nat Turner's Rebellion. In 1830s, we have the abolitionist movement getting to a height. Okay, we have the we have the North pushing really hard. They're having campaigns. You have the Quakers who are out there petitioning against slavery. First of all, in 1808, the quote unquote African slave trade is abolished, where you can't bring in any new bodies. You have the second migration, where there was there's two forced migrations. You have this forced migration from these outliers like Virginia, like Maryland, like these coastal regions, and this great push down into Mississippi and Alabama and all these regions here, because they have depleted the soil on the eastern seaboard. And so you have them beginning to steal people. You can't bring in any new people. So they're beginning to steal people and push them down south. This is why one of the threats would be like, boy, if you don't act right, I'm going to sell you down south. You ain't never going to see the light of day. So we have to understand contextually. This is why I say it's very important to go into this period. And it's also therapeutic and healing, because you begin to get control of what it is that you're looking at this narrative. All right. So all of this stuff is in the pot. And the pushback is, man, mind your business. I'm going to show you how glad these slaves really are. And so they come forward with this thing, and the people are eating it up. They're gobbling it up. It's like, oh, yeah, this is so good. This is so good. They're eating it up. Okay, so the first person, in my estimation, the melanated body was already affected, and the melanated body was not going necessarily to these theaters in the beginning. So who had leisure time to go to these theaters and pay money to see people being mocked and tried? It's like, how many people that's listening now have money to keep going to ballet plays on Broadway? But guess what? Broadway is still going. That means somebody who has the time, who has the money, takes advantage of these spaces of entertainment. Because if the entertainment is not being supported, then the entertainment is no longer going to be there. So the people who, the aristocracy, all right, the people who had extra time, they were the ones who were being affected by this poison of this type of stereotype, by this misinformation, because were the minds who they desired to propagandize. We have to understand it was a propaganda campaign. Now, today, we're still affected by it. But like I said, I think the whole is the ones who are affected by it. So far, what happened? We're looking at Blackface. Who did it? We're looking at the people, the major players in the beginning of who was doing it and who was pushing forth this agenda. Who was affected by it? We talked briefly. Again, this is just an overview. Who knew it was happening? So we're looking at, again, this is just, who did it and who knew it was happening. So all of the people in society, they then begin to know it's happening. It's in the cartoons. It's in the caricatures. Later on, it comes on the radio, like Amos and Andy, if I'm not mistaken. It comes on the radio. You know what I'm saying? So society now is participating in this very racially charged, propagandizing effect to look at all melanated bodies in a certain way. What did you do about it? So one would have to go into history and be like, yo, who was pushing back against this narrative? who was the thinkers of the day. And we just read a poem by Paul Lawrence Dunbar, who it looks like he's conceded, like he accepted the fact that, you know what, I can't push against it. I'm just going to have to wear this mask. There was one of the famous lines in the show, and I don't know why they didn't bring it back. What was the name of the movie I was reviewing, y'all? It was on the last 2 years. The Underground. The Underground. Was it The Underground? Okay, it was one of the shows because I have a lot of stuff swimming in my mind. But there was, I think it was The Underground, and I think it was Ernestine. For all those underground people out there, shout out. But the thought was there was no right way to be a slave, right? So in this in enslaved, oppressive space, some resorted, like Dunbar, to saying there's no right way to be a slave. I'm just going to cover my pain because if I show it, all they're going to do is exploit it anyway. Right? So we have to look at different people and what was done about it. When Marcus Garvey came from Jamaica to America, Marcus Garvey is looking at the situation like, yo, what are y'all doing about it? You see what I'm saying? And then Marcus Garvey gets into this beef with Du Bois and all of the people of the day, because Marcus's perspective was like, yo, don't kowtow to them. Don't let them come at you like this. And so for those who may have not been aware that the song or the flag, the UNIA flag, and the desire to even make it was because of these minstrelly type songs that and the one in particular was every nation has a flag but the coon, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the name of the song? Hold on. The flag. Yes, every nation has a flag but the coon. And again, we're talking about minstrelly. This all has something to do with something. So this song, let me give you this. Let me share my screen here. If y'all could tell, this is my zone right here. If y'all can't tell, like Mamuna's mad hype. This is my zone because I find it just very, very interesting. So this, again, we're talking about minstrel shows. We're talking about, I spoke about in another place, the concept of the coon, okay? And what in my estimation or in my studies, what it boils back down to. But for me, everything leads to something else. Hold on, where did it go? Okay, but speaking about blackface and speaking about how we read about this thought process being into the music and into the entertainment, coon songs, this type of entertainment was huge in the early 1900s. So every race has a flag, but the coon was a song written by William A. Hillen and J. Fred Health that was popular in the United States and the United Kingdom. The song followed the previous success of All Coons Look Alike to Me. We have that saying today, or you still hear all niggas so-called, and excuse my French for those who, this is what they say, look alike. So when you scrape up everybody off the street and put them in a lineup and you tell us that this was so long ago, right? This was so long ago, but you can scrape up so many melanated bodies off the street and put them in a lineup because they have on a hoodie and some pants, because all this thought process of all coons look alike, to me, is still here. So law enforcement says melanated male, all coons look alike to me, right? Written in 1896 by Ernest Hogan. Cites it as being one of the 3 coon songs which firmly established the term coon in the American vocabulary. It says the song was a musical hit on the day by A.M. Rothschild and Company in 1901. So if you jump down here, the song motivated the creation of the Pan-African flag in 1920. That's the UNIA. By the members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League in 1927. Okay, so because of this song that was so popularized, like the hit songs on the billboards, it was so popularized, this song that glorified this thought process of blackface and stereotyping of the melanated bodies, it was being eaten up way after slavery. Slavery ends supposedly in 1965. We're in 1901, some 40-something years later, and a song such as this is so relative to the culture. This is the album cover here. Okay, if we can say that, the old school album cover with the people who wrote it. Let's take a look at their faces. The latest song successes by William A. Helen and J. Fred Heff. Every race has a flag but the coon. Look at their faces. He's even smiling. The one in the front has a smirk on his face. So when people say that this is a very long time ago, and what's this blackface controversy? And I'm not understanding about why all the residues of this stuff is still here. Okay? So when we talk about it, when we educate ourselves about it, then it helps us to deactivate the trigger and have more informed conversations for melanated and non-melanated people. Because there's a lot of our own people who do not know this. Okay? Okay. So blackface, why is it so? Again, I said Amos and Andy was a big one. Amos and Andy was a very long-running radio show that later became, I believe, a TV show and TV, with the advent of TV. And then Amos and Aaron, all of these caricatures, and I go over it in the book. What about? I don't even want to get up for the book, y'all. Should I get up for the book, y'all? Hold on, let me get up for the book. Let me get up for the book. All right, I got it for the book. This is the book. This is why a lot of this research is very nigh on to me, because this is the first edition of the book. I was really looking at the angry Black woman syndrome, okay? This thought process of, and I heard it, it's funny because I was listening to a live yesterday, okay? And it was so emotionally charged. And it was melanated people cursing out their own people, screaming at the top of their lungs about how, one man in particular, about how he hated melanated women and their attitudes, and they make how much they make him sick and how much they're not like the other races. And I'm just sitting there like, this is a lot. But if we just stay in our emotional turmoil and stay in the trauma of it, then we won't understand. What happens is a lot of us lack patience. A lot of us lack the desire to understand, and we only want to express what we feel, right? We don't want to grow from that place. We don't want to connect the dots. So like this blackface controversy, we want to be reactive. We want to call for boycotts. Like a lot of people said, who was buying Gucci to begin with? Like I took the liberty to go over there, because since I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Gucci, I took the liberty to go over there and look at the sweater. First of all, I live in Florida, so I wouldn't need a sweater like that, number one. Number two, why is the sweater $890? Can someone help me make it make sense? Why is the sweater $890, the amount of somebody's rent payment? You know what I'm saying? I mean, why? And I jokingly said, and it's not funny, there was a report that I shared on here sometime. I believe I wrote an article about it, where a brother who was in Georgia found one of these. He didn't find somebody who had artifacts that was passed down within their family unit, that were passed down in their family unit, actually had slave hair. And I termed it the slave hair chair. Okay. So I was like, what is this sweater made out of? Since everybody's saying it's blackface, are we easily triggered? You know what I'm saying? Or was that their real attempt? We saw Prada having this little monkey, this caricature on their bag. Like, who even would want to wear something like that? And so that ties into the trauma, and it also ties into our desire to associate with something that the oppressor has, because in our estimation, it makes us more valuable. I say that I'm talking about many things, so hopefully I'm not losing you for those who come here and say, well, she's going all over the place. My point is, in order to understand why this blackface controversy continues to be a controversy, we have to understand what's propping it up. In this book, Coming of Age in Mississippi, which is one of the, if I'm not mistaken, the poorest state in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, at least it's in the top 5. In this book, when she goes to work for the Europeans and she's looking at all of the things that the Europeans have that she doesn't have access to, she goes with her mother to the furniture store and asks for this big post bed. And the reaction of the woman in the furniture store was like, where did you see that at? Like, you're not supposed to have access to these things. And she's like, you know, she tells the mother that the lady who she worked for had it. And after that, the mother's saying to her that these people, these Europeans are spoiling you because you shouldn't be having access to the finer things. And so what I see a lot of our people doing is that when they get money, when they get status, the thing that has been held back from them for so long, the first thing they do, is go to get the thing that is going to make them feel as though they're on the same level as a European. You see what I'm saying? They're going to get the thing that you withheld from them. So they're going to spend ridiculous amounts of money, even though the people over the years have told you, I don't want you ruining my product, like Michael Kors and Tommy Hilfiger and Gucci. Essentially, when I thought about this rapper who I didn't know anything about, but seeing his name, could this be in retaliation for a rapper who, for some, may fit this caricature, wearing such a prestigious name as Gucci and naming himself Gucci Mane? Could this have been a dig? These are all the things we have to consider when we're talking about, you know, Michael Kors allegedly saying that they didn't want weaves in their bags. But yet and still, because we want to say, you know, you go out like people at the Grammys, I didn't watch it, but you go out and say, well, what are you wearing today? And if you say, you know what, I'm wearing Rokisha from around the corner, it's like, what? You have to then say you're wearing whatever is this quote status symbol, and who makes these status symbols? The dominant people in society. And who tells you you're not acceptable? The dominant people in society. So again, back to the acne on the face. So this book goes into a brief history, overview of how these caricatures, specifically the angry black woman or the sapphire or the independent woman caricature, came down through the time, and how it was cemented in the culture, and how now life is beginning to imitate art. Art imitating life, life imitating art, and it's this very vicious, toxic cycle that we have to analyze. But let me continue because I'm going long. How long am I now? Let me know how y'all doing. Let me know how y'all doing. What did they do about it? So one of the questions is, what did you do about it, or what did your ancestors do about it when it first happened? What are you doing about it now? I happen to be bringing awareness to it now. Some people may be boycotting, some people may be angry, some people may be lashing out. What are you doing about it? And what did they do about it when it actually happened? Because we're talking about historical trauma, right? So we have to acknowledge that this is a space of trauma. And then we're going to look at all the major players in the game. When did it happen? Again, we went back to a little bit about when did it start happening, what was happening at the time, what was the environment, what fueled it, you know what I mean? How long did it happen for? We saw the article said 100 years. I beg to differ. I think it's still happening. Because as we can see, it's still happening. It's all in the news that it's still happening in 2019. So it's still happening. And where did it happen? And again, we see that it happened on the continental United States. And from there, it went overseas. It's in Britain, it's in England. And so we see that this diseased thought, this means of control, controlling the narrative, this means of mocking and chiding, this means of suppressing another people that's already suppressed, has infected the populace and has gone overseas and affected the mind. So when you get on a plane, or when you go to another space and people look at you, all of these preconceived notions come from the exposure that they have had, mostly to media. So when people say it's just entertainment, I beg to differ. Someone's lying to you. It is not just entertainment. This is what is informing. I'll tell you a story. When we moved to Ethiopia, okay, you're in Ethiopia. Now, the history of Ethiopia is supposed to be the only country on the continent that wasn't subdued, right? This is why they always have this propaganda campaigns of Ethiopia is so poor, this and that. It wasn't conquered. Right now, I would say that industrialism or capitalism is what is coming in and eroding the fabric. But up until this point, Ethiopia is pretty much, self-contained. The culture is intact, all of these things of this nature. Now, with the advent of outside forces coming in the name of capitalism and advancement, you slowly seeping these things seeping into the society. So here we are, coming from the West. Because of reggae music and Jamaica's affiliation with Selassie, it's not like you are just not like you are foreign to them. They kind of recognize you, and the first thing that they can associate through media is Bob Marley. So the first thing they want to say is, yeah, man, Jamaican. Even if you're not Jamaican, you could come from wherever. If you're melanated from abroad, you're Jamaican and you're a Rasta. Okay, fine. Further than that, so that was one way in which media affected the minds of people who never saw you in this lifetime. Okay, so I met a cool youth. We met a cool youth. He became like our guy. His name was Jonas, and Jonas used to watch. We're in Addis, okay? We're in Addis Ababa, and we're walking around, and you have all these little youths. But Jonas had a cool spirit, okay? And Jonas used to watch BET. BET. And I'm like, Jonas watching BET? And I'm in certain spaces where people had access to the internet, or in certain spaces where people had access to satellite TV, they're watching BET. So they're getting their idea of American culture from the entertainment industry. Okay. And so Jonas has his pants, like how low riding, like how the people would have it, their pants here in America. And so I'm like, what the? So I'm like, yo, Jonas, pull up your pants, right? And he's doing the walk and the carrying on like the rappers on BET. And then he's like, yo, Thug Life in his Ethiopian accent. And I'm like, Thug Life? I'm scratching my head like, what are you talking about? And he pulls out, like, they have like pictures and laminated pictures of rappers and Tupac. And I'm like, so they look at the media and they look at the TV and they look at the rap song, listen to the rap song, and they watch the rap video, and then they say, this is American culture. This is the melanated person in the West. And when you look at who's controlling this narrative, that they're not going to really let you sing certain songs that are going to uplift you. We see that was stomped out and gangster rap was brought in. We cannot say that this is not still happening, that these caricatures, this updated edition of Blackface is not still in existence. It is. Because someone else is behind that camera. Someone else is behind that lens. Someone else is telling you how your story should be told. What lyrics are acceptable? What lyrics are not? What image are we going to push? What image we are not? This is the same thing as Blackface. The only thing is that the individuals has come from in front of the screen, and now they begin to write this script. I wanted to come back because I was talking to Sister Mayana about this, a Blackface conversation, when I wanted to come to you guys and speak to it. And as we were discussing, even further than Blackface, and she came up with the term as I was describing it, she said, no, Mooney, you know what? It's pink face when we talk about Blackface wrapped in a gender role. So for instance, I know I'm going long, but I did say I was talking about the American Blackface controversy, and it's related. The Angry Black Woman, once again, I enumerate all of the Angry Black Women, and this is more like of a healing book. Some people, I got some reviews, like I thought she was going to go a little bit more in on the history. My intent always is healing. So some people may not understand it and think I'm going to give you like all of these like 50 million facts of which, you know what I mean, you're just going to use it intellectually and not really advance yourself. So I got some bad reviews for that. I'll take that. You know what I mean? But I enumerated on TV, like Martin, Shanae, like, what's the name of the next one? Hold on, let me just go there. Like Diary of a Tired Black Man. These are reinforcing, like Amos and Andy, Sapphire, like Waiting to Exhale, like Tony's character for Girlfriends, like Florence off of the Jeffersons. All of these are the angry Black woman characters in television, like Pamela James and Martin. These are all of these angry Black, like Cookie off of Empire, which I don't watch that show, but she's famous, Cookie off of Empire, for this angry Black woman. So don't tell me that the way in which the slave master saw you, projected it to the world, he said, you want to act? You said, yeah. He said, well, play this role. And then you began to play that role. So much so that you forgot that he's the one who gave you the role. He's the one who said that this is how you are. So the young girls and the society is seeing this, and then we say, you know what? That's how we are. Fast forward. reason why I wanted to come back, and I'll come back another time to talk about pink face. We have blackface wrapped in pink face. So as I was talking, because I'm a research person, I'm like, wait, hold up. As I was talking to her, I said, let me look at how much, because Tyler Perry came on air and said that he's going to retire the Medea character. Okay? The Medea character is blackface wrapped in pink face. Okay? Hold on. So how much did Perry, and it's very profitable. I want to say that. If it wasn't profitable, and the same way in which in the early 1980s it wasn't profitable, how much did Tyler Perry's Medea? I looked it up the other day. So this is blackface wrapped in pink face. Okay. He says he's gonna retire the Medea character because he doesn't want to be old as Medea playing Medea. But remember, if we want to talk about blackface, we cannot be hypocritical. We cannot talk about blackface and feel indifferent. Or we can, but I would call it hypocrisy. You know what I'm saying? Mona said that. We can't. I'll take that back. I can't tell you what you could do or can't do. But what I'm saying is if we're going to talk about blackface and be all up in arms, then we have to talk about it across the board because historically, the melanated and the European people both played blackface characters. So let's be honest and stop playing games. But one, we want to boycott and do all of these things. But on the other side, when blackface is wrapped in pink face and cross-dressing, what that's doing, that's celebrated. Now, when I did the numbers, it was about $1 billion collectively of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies. Wait, hold on. When I did the math before. Okay? No, wait. Okay, so domestically, these movies that feature this caricature that was cemented in slavery of this mammy / angry black woman that's played by a man, which was historically minstrelly, because that's a minstrel show. When you're looking at Tyler Perry, you're looking at modern day minstrel show. Why? Because women were not allowed on the stages in that time. And so men would play women. So you're looking at a modern day minstrel show. Domestically, $50,406,346. Just the Diary of the Mad Black Woman that made opening domestically. So I'm gonna read domestically. All of those movies grossed $482,321,099. And worldwide, this is the image being projected to the world, it's $483,811,211. So, Amuna, if we round up the domestic 382.1 million to 500 million, and we round up worldwide to 500 million, that's close to $1 billion made on a minstrel show by a melanated man. But what do? We applaud it. We do what? I remember when the movie for Birth of a Nation, Nat Turner story, came out. At the same time, the Medea something movie came out. And guess what grossed more? Let's see. So when we talk about we're just upset, this is why I'm saying the blackface issue, we're upset for another reason. We're upset because it's still tied to slavery. We're not necessarily upset. Not everybody. I can't say everybody, but the majority are not necessarily upset about blackface. They're upset about the person who's doing the blackface. Let's be honest. It's only when we're honest. It's not only when we're honest that we're going to really get somewhere in this healing process. So when Birth of a Nation opened, right? This is to show you how we, the people, applaud. And who is the majority of the women who are supporting pink face? We're going to call it pink face. Hashtag pink face. Who is supporting pink face? All of this is at a stroke of a fingertip. How much did Birth of a Nation gross? Birth of a Nation came out in 2016. It grossed domestically $15,861,566 and only made $7 million opening on the opening weekend. This was 2016. So what Tyler Perry movie came out in 2016? I'm trying to remember here. Hold on one second. Because I remember that Tyler Perry movie that came out that very same weekend. And I think it was one of them Halloween things. Hold on. 2016. Boo. There it goes. It was Boo, a Madea Halloween. Okay, so we just said Birth of a Nation grossed only $15 million domestically. 15.8, so call it $16 million. But yet still, Blackface and Whiteface, or Blackface and Pinkface grossed. Where did my thing go? Hold on, y'all. Where did you go? Okay, Birth of a Nation. Y'all remember that number. Somebody put it in the box for me. Birth of a Nation grossed 15.8. Tyler Perry movie grossed the numbers. You can just, this is all accessible. You can just look it up. So domestically, are y'all ready? Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready? So theatrical performance. What did I just say? How much did it gross? 18.3 million? 18.3 million, right? 18.3 million was Birth of a Nation. This is the history of those who fought against oppression, okay? Those who fought against what was happening at the time. This was the movie of, and there's another controversy surrounding Birth of a Nation that I actually bought the books, but I'm not going to go into that because I'm going to get off topic, right? This was Birth of a Nation. I'm going to write it. Birth of a Nation. Now, Tyler Perry movie that came out that same time, Tyler Perry Boo, grossed $73.2 million. Put your money where your mouth is. $73.2 million. Put your money where your mouth is. Are we really upset about blackface? Are we really upset about blackface? I guess I'll leave it there. We'll come back and talk more later, y'all. I've been riding for a minute. There's many things to think about. If we put our money where our mouth is, and we put our support where our emotions are, then one has to say, we're not really upset about being mocked. We're not upset about being chided. We're not upset about being goaded. We're upset about who's doing it and who we feel has the right to do it. Not that the it in and of itself is wrong. And I'm here to say that the it in and of itself is the danger. The it in and of itself is the corrosive nature that we have been experienced to. The it in and of itself was the answer to the systematic oppression. I'll leave you with one story that I found. It came in like it was a common story that was told over and over again. And it was about a woman named Suki. I read it in a number of narratives. Yeah, hold on. I'll tell you about Suki one moment. And that's where I concluded in one of the readings that this all Suki moment, like I'm about to all Suki right now. I'll be right back. Hold on. All right, I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about Suki, but for those who just joined us, you might have to catch the replay. This is just a recap. In the beginning, the minstrel show was the European imitating and projecting this dramatized version, this animated, overly animated, exaggerated version of the melanated body. It came to a rise during the antebellum 1800s, but more specifically the early 1800s. It was the reason for a pushback, or let's say it was a pushback to a lot of the conversation to abolish slavery. And this thought that the propaganda campaign of the South to a certain degree to kind of protect their interests and to show that slavery was this benign institution. Okay. And so it caught on, and a lot of the Northerners were buying into it. They called it, that's what I was trying to remember what they called it. They called it the peculiar institution. You go look that up. Right? They called it the peculiar institution. And so this is me just recapping. And so when we look at, we were able to see in a real-time study that it's not necessarily that you're upset or the melanated populace are upset about the caricatures, because they still support them. And they support them with their wallets. And again, I use Tyler Perry as a study, and the fact that American history, okay, doesn't get as much respect. It doesn't get as much support as the almost grossing for the entire time that he's been doing this, 1 billion, close to $1 billion grossing at the box office of over the how many years? 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, over $1 billion, or no, close to $1 billion in 20 years of making money off of this caricature. So back to Suki. Suki was what many would call today the angry Black woman. Suki, there's a narrative, and in different spaces, the details change, but the gist is the same. Many times, like it says in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, the melanated woman was sexually harassed at the home front, AKA the domestic abuse spot. Like people go to jobs today and they say you sexually harassment, and you got Harvey Weinstein and all these people and they bring in charges. She was sexually harassed in her home. That wasn't new. She was sexually harassed in a job, and the job was the master's location, the plantation, the office, wherever he had you. He felt he had a right to your body. This is why we see this even on to today. Suki was there, according to the narrative, making soap with old school way, with lye and ashes and a big old cauldron, and she's making soap. The master comes to assault her, sexually assault her. A lot of times they will go out at night, like we saw displayed in the Roots movie. They will go out at night to the cabins or during the day and seclude you and sexually assault you, or even just rape you, okay? Suki decided it's not going down like that, Holmes. Hold on. So Suki, and I'm gonna come talk about that 1 second, one tough guy. Suki decides that she's going to fight back. And in fighting back, she pushes the master into the pot of lye, his behind, and it scalds him. And because he was afraid of his wife knowing that he was assaulting her, later on he sells her. Okay? And this is the story of Suki who fights back. So the question is, if the master was one of the playwrights, if he was one of the writers or directors on a show, a minstrel show, what do you think, or how do you think he would portray the character of Suki? In his eyes, she would be angry, she would be violent, she would be mean, she would be combative. But from Suki's perspective, Suki was defending herself. So this is the issue and the problem when we let the person who is bullying, the person who is offending, have the right to write your narrative. They're only seeing it from their eyes. And this is all about perspective. So that's the story of Suki. Very interesting story. One tough guy says, I do believe that we control our own characters like every other culture. There's nothing wrong with controlling and creating our own character. I would agree. But in the case of Tyler Perry, he didn't create that caricature. That character, to me, That caricature is a manifestation of these images that have been projecting from that time until this, that we internalized and then began to say it was ours. That caricature was something that was created out of the oppression, out of the trauma. That caricature was a maladaptive way. That's not something that we continue necessarily to perpetuate, because at some point we lead people to believe it's malfunctional and it's dysfunctional, and it leads people to believe that this is how we should act and it's justifiable. So I agree with you. We should control our own caricatures. However, we adopted what it is that someone else saw us and how someone else saw us, and then we made it ours. I watch a lot of Nigerian movies for cultural reasons, and Nigerians are 100% in control of their own narrative, right? And I'll say this, I'm going to talk about African movies. Nigerians are at 100% Nollywood. When you look at Nollywood, Nollywood is the third largest industry behind Bollywood. There's Hollywood, Bollywood, then Nollywood. Nollywood by far produces, and their movies are more low budget, so it's really storyline. You ain't gonna get a whole lot of extra stuff. I mean, lately then they come up with a little bit of camera angle, but by the storyline alone, Nollywood pulls you in. And in watching all of these Nollywood characters, Nollywood is concentrate on human shortcomings, human issues, human struggles, and issues that surround them as a people. So yes, somebody may come to Nollywood and be like, oh, you know what? They do a lot of obia in these movies, or they do a lot of such and such in these movies, or whatever the case in these movies, right? And somebody will conclude that that's all they do. But Nollywood is in control of their narrative. It is not so with us. We're only limitedly in control of the narrative of what we are allowed to project. So when you have a movie like Hidden Figures, it's a big to-do, because the reality is that most of the time you're not projected as the one who made the stoplight, or like we're seeing because it's Black History Month, the one who made the cell phone, or the one who made the navigation system, or the one who, you're not projected. You're not being put on the screen as this. Who's going to give you the funding? Who's going to give you the marketing budget? Who's going to give you the studio? Who's going to allow you to do this? And with the emergence of YouTube, what we have been able to see in this spaces is that people who desire to tell their story are necessarily foregoing all of the glitz and the glamour and giving you the real, so that you can see another perspective to be like, wow, I didn't know that about them. You see what I'm saying? And that's the danger of this Hollywood narrative and this popular culture narrative, because someone else has to check off your paper before it's allowed to go through the door. But in Nollywood, when you look through all the scripts, when you look through who the camera people are, you look through who the storyline person is, you see that it's them. And I think that's the difference, as well as Bollywood. You know what I'm saying? And even then you have to go through who's willing to tell the story, but at least that person is of your people group who said, you know what, this is a good story to tell. This is not a good story to tell. So that's my thoughts. I know I've been on here for a minute. Let me know, comment in below. You know what I'm saying? Give us your thoughts. You know, we could continue this conversation openly and honestly about what it's really about. As I said, based on my observation, I don't think in and of itself it's about blackface. It's about who has the right to put on blackface and pink face or whatever other color face they're putting on. So with that said, everybody have a blessed day. We will talk soon. We'll come back and read more of Coming of Age in Mississippi a little later. All right.